advances in the pioneer work that she has done in genealogy. And most recently, she was awarded, this is interesting, the Medal of the 4 Sephardic Synagogues for her ongoing work in bringing this heritage to light. So the 4 Sephardic synagogues?
In Jerusalem, yes.
In Jerusalem,
yes.
in Jerusalem. Very, very, very impressive. And again, we are honored and very pleased to bring you Jeannie Milgram. And I will stop sharing my screen. And this is going to be fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, you guys. So thank you, Jeannie, very much.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure. Sue and Joy, who I've been in touch with, and Justin, thank you so much for inviting me here today. So the village of Fermoselle is right behind me. And if you look all the way to the back, and that the second opening, that is where my 15th grandmother lived in 1545. So I was able to trace this lineage. It's very different from tracing a regular lineage. So I am going to start immediately with my presentation. There's a lot of information to cover, and I want to be able to get as much as I can for you. And I had mentioned before that many times my screen will freeze up just when I'm ready to do it. So I'm going to try one more time and see if I can share this. And if not, then I think that, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to basically be talking about why is crypto-Jewish genealogy different from all others. I want to talk about the resources that are available. I'm going to be speaking quickly because there's just so much to cover. So while it may look similar to other genealogical searches, the actual way to trace back to a family that was Jewish before the Inquisition means you have to go back via the Catholic Church. There's no other way, because church and state were tied in. We're talking in Spain and Portugal, and even in Mexico, if you're searching for people coming from the Mexican Inquisition. So you really have to pick a lineage. Traditionally, Jewish lineages are from the mother. So in that way, it's a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about all the 8 lines from your great grandparents. So pick a line of your mother, if that's, you want to go traditional. And then you find your mother, you find your grandmother, you find your great grandmother, and you forget about the men. For all practical purposes, in this case, you forget about the men because you are just looking. That's why my first book was my 15 grandmothers. My second book was my 20 grandmothers. And later, by the way, I did fill in the blanks of the men, but that's when I went all the way back. So we're looking only for the women. Even for very seasoned genealogists, crypto-Jewish genealogy, it's kind of, you have to turn around everything you ever learned about genealogists. You kind of forget about the family stories, the lore, the information that was passed down from all the abuelas, and you make believe you know nothing. This will help you tremendously because it will allow you a free search in your head into the past without getting stuck. Many times, grandparents or just family lore that's written down, maybe picked up from somebody else, you get stuck in your head in a particular, you got to make your head a blank slate. And this is one of the ways that you will be able to go free into what you're looking at and say, or not say, oh, wow, that doesn't match what I knew before. So remember, you're trying to go back 500 plus years of history and look at the underbelly of what everyone else is seeing. Why? Because the crypto Jews, that's exactly what they were doing. They were the underbelly of society. So on this point, I just want to mention, through my research and when I was in Brussels, I met a guy, seasoned genealogist, him, his dad, his grandfather, they even had records from this village in their warehouse. I mean, I don't know how they had it, but they had been doing genealogy. He came to one of the places where I spoke over there in Brussels, and I didn't know who he was, but he had somehow matched his tree up to mine. And he was blown away because for at least since the early 1900s, his family had been following our mutual family, and they never knew that this was underneath. So it really is hidden underneath. And this is particularly because now he's my most fervent searcher for information. This is not Sephardic genealogy. That's another topic that I am not well versed in at all. I know very little about it. Sephardic genealogy is about the Jews that left Spain in 1492. And the genealogy, crypto-Jewish genealogy, is about the Jews that stayed after 1492 and they stayed hidden. So we cannot really confuse it with Sephardic genealogy. This is about Jews that were made Catholic and are still Catholic today. Like my family, I was born Catholic. So this is about Jews that became Catholic and for 300-400 years were Catholic. So let's take a close look at some of the terminology. And this is important because some of the terminology, if you start going the wrong way with the terminology, then you may not understand it later. Back in the day, Marranos is what was a term used to refer to Jews that pretended to be Catholic. And the most famous book, I think it was written, The Marranos by Cecil B. Roth, way back in the day. And it was now just something that we just don't use because it means pig. And it didn't just mean pig that the Catholics were calling us pigs. Our fellow Jews were calling us pig, or were calling themselves pigs if the person became outright Catholic and really felt Catholic. So we just stay away. So we use the term converso, a person who converted to avoid persecution. We use the term crypto-Jews, those that were practicing Judaism underground while pretending to be Catholic. And wait, I think it moved. No, I'm sorry. The terminology. Okay. Crypto-Jewish descendants, people like me, I'm a descendant of a crypto-Jew. A lot of people get this wrong. I am not a crypto-Jew today. I am a descendant of those that were hiding at the time. Anusim, you may hear this term a lot. In El Paso, there's the Anusim Center. Anusim means forced or coerced. And B'nai Anusim in Hebrew means the children of the forced. So in Hebrew, and it's started to be used very commonly. So I would either be called a crypto-Jewish descendant or I would be called a B'nai Anusim. The other term that's really important to know is New Christian and Old Christian. Whenever an academic writes about our history, they use these terms instead of the other ones. They don't use really Marrano. A New Christian was a family that had become Christian, new from being Jewish, and an Old Christian is a family that was always Jewish. So sometimes you look at the Inquisition records and it says that the person is 1/2 New Christian. So you understand that the new ones were the crypto-Jews, the old ones were the ones that were always there. So all of the information is not easily seen in the actual documents. Like I said, it's the underbelly. So you have to do this search with a big concentration also on family customs. It's crucial to sit with the family elders and get as much history, but not the lore, not, in other words, it's important to ask pointed questions like the ones here. We're not trying to get the ones of, you know, oh, back in the day, you know, the grandmother lit candles in the closet and that kind of thing. It's important, but remember, you want to try to keep a clean slate. So were there a lot of cousin intermarriages in the family? We come from incredible endogamy. Nobody married outside of the family. So in my family, on my mom's side, every generation married each other. First and second cousins only. So if you see a family that's like this, all really cousin intermarriages, this is a big clue. Nuns and priests. Many nuns and priests in our families because they were making, the nuns were protecting the people and the priests were making sure that even if you married Catholic, like a Catholic, that you were still doing the Jewish rituals on the side. So does the family have any unusual rituals? Were some of the babies not baptized? Why is that important? In my family, in the papers that I found, very few babies were baptized. It always says that they stayed at home because they were too sick to go to the church. So this is something like my cousin, in a parallel, doing the family tree, was finding this but not paying attention to it. I come along and I'm paying attention. Wait, wait, wait. Why aren't these babies being baptized? So you kind of have to read through the papers. Or there's special cooking or kitchen customs. In the cookbook that Sue was talking about, I talk about how my grandmothers left all of these recipes behind. And I talk about how they were following Jewish ritual and writing it down. This isn't even verbal. I have all of this written down from, the recipes go back to the Inquisition. So type of work that the family was in, this is super important, because normally you could not change, your names changed during the Inquisition, but you can't change what you do for a living. A goldsmith does not all of a sudden, start selling ribbons. It just doesn't happen. Or if they're a butcher. So even though they may have changed their name, silversmithing was passed down, selling ribbons and haberdashery, my family was in that business, was passed down, butchers passed down. So the type of work, and of course that's mostly alluding to the men, but it's still very important to know, if they were shoemakers. My family also, very large shoemakers. To this day in Spain, a big portion of my family, they don't make the shoes, but they sell shoes. So it kind of stays even through the hundreds of years. Was the family religious? Did they always go to church on Sunday? That is something that I didn't realize until I had gotten very deep into this. Why? Because when I was in Catholic school, my sister and I, when we came from Cuba, I was 4, my sister was 8, and we were put in Catholic schools right away. And part of the Catholic school, you had to go to church on Sunday. So my parents dropped us off at noon, picked us up at 1. And meanwhile, all of the other families, big Cuban families, the grandparents, great grandparents, everybody's like milling around in the church. And my sister and I are like looking at each other like we're by ourselves. But it never clicked to me that I never, my mom never went in, my dad never went in, and neither did my grandparents. So, it's kind of interesting that you have to, it's almost like right now after this pandemic, that whole term woke, like everybody's understanding everything. Well, that's the kind of thing that took me a long time to get it. Like, oh my gosh, they weren't in the church because they don't go to church. So you have to look at everything around you. Lighting candles on a Friday night or once a year, my family never did it. I hear some people that still light candles on a Friday night, but my family never did that. So what are you looking to have on each person you find? A birth or baptism certificate. Usually they're the same thing in the Catholic Church. A marriage and a death certificate, last wills and testaments, and notary records. The folkloric information, like I said, occupation, special skills, musical or artistic talent, newspaper clippings, pictures or drawings of the person or town. So this is what your final goal should be, is to have all of this information. I know that when people are coming from the Mexican Inquisition, and I've seen this again and again in Texas and New Mexico, Colorado, people are hooking up their lineage to known lineages that they see in books. I don't know how accurate that is or that isn't, and I cannot speak to that. But I have never recommended or personally worked with a secondary source. A secondary source means something that somebody else has done. I'm the kind of person, and I actually was able to make a return with the rabbis in Israel with my primary sources, meaning I had in my grubby little paws every birth and baptism certificate. Is it harder than opening a book? Absolutely. But I love the fact that I know exactly, I'm not relying on somebody else's work. And as famous as the other person may be, you need to understand for yourself, do you want to trust somebody else's work? Or do you want to have every birth certificate, marriage in your hands? That's very personal. So we talked about the Jewish lineages, traditional or maternal only. You don't take into consideration any of the men. If you hit a roadblock with one of the grandmothers, you can try to go to her sister, and that's perfectly fine. To try to work up the tree, I had to do that once, but normally you will have all of these grandmothers. And names alone are not enough. I can't express this. I mean, I would be saying this for an hour if I could. Do not rely on names. In the Iberian Peninsula, the full names were bought, they were sold, they were given away. And the name of the family today has nothing to do with the name before 1492. The original Jewish names disappeared, replaced by names that were topographical, such as almendral, which means almond, or puente, which means bridge, manzana, which is an apple, and so on and so forth. It's very simple to when you're working these lineages, you understand exactly what is a converso name and what is an original Jewish names. We just don't have them. The term Portuguese in the Inquisition files around the world, and especially in Latin America, this is crucial. It means a Jewish person. It does not mean a person from Portugal. So this is important, especially if you feel that your relatives were in the Cartagena, Colombia, or the Lima Inquisition. They would say, the record would say like Jeannie Milgram, Portuguesa. Jeannie Milgram, a Portuguese, was not meaning that I was from Portugal. It was, she is a Jew. And the other most common misconception is EZ and ES. People think that for some reason, I don't know where that came from, that if it ends in ES, like Martinez, ES, versus Martinez, EZ, that the Martinez ES was a Jew. This is not correct. What happened is during the expulsion, all the names in Spain were with EZ, Jews or not. When they went on to Portugal, which started about 40 years later, the Portuguese always wrote ES in all of their records, Jew or not. When they came to the New World, the islands and Mexico or wherever you want, the names went back to their original EZ, Jew or not. So please, this is like, if I could tell you what are the two questions that this is the one, and this is, what do you think of my name? It's Diaz. Well, I'm sure it's your name now, but it wasn't your name in 1492. So let's just put that aside and let's just do the work, get back to the original name. When you see the term alias, it means names that were taken by the crypto Jews when someone in their family was caught. People change their names all the time. I'll have an abuela who was born, let's say, Fernandez, and she got married as Jimenez, and her death certificate will say Alvarez. I mean, constantly. So this is why I said earlier, we're following where people lived, we're following what they did, we're following a paper trail, and we're trying to kind of forget the names for now and just, continue with documents, and you'll do yourself a favor. It's important to know your history. If you don't know your history, you're going to struggle a lot on this kind of search. So these are the permanent Inquisition tribunals, Old World versus New World. Old World, obviously Spain, Portugal, Italy. New World, anything on this side of the world. So look at the dates of the tribunals in Spain and the places where they were. And then you see the tribunals in Portugal, again, about 40 years later. And then in the New World, over here, we've got Mexico City, we've got Lima, Peru, we've got Cartagena, Colombia. So if you understand and look up the history, let's say you're looking for some family from Chile, you need to know, was it Cartagena, Colombia that had power over Chile? Or was it Lima, Peru that had power over Chile? Who had power over Brazil, for example, where there's so many crypto Jews? So it's important, if you were from any one of these cities or your ancestors, it'll probably be a lot easier for you to find the information. Okay, the idea is that you have to follow the lineage all the way back to the Inquisition. Why is that? because you're asking to find a Jewish lineage. Our synagogues were destroyed, our cemeteries were destroyed, everything was destroyed. So what are we left with? We are left with a typical Inquisition document. Here's a copy of one. This happens to be one from my family in Portugal, and it's called a processo, like a process. When you get arrested here in the States, they start a file. That's basically what a processo is. It's a judgment. These judgments are between 200 and 600 pages long. They're written on pergamino with like a feather pen, front and back. You can see the shape this one is in. And I'll talk about the digitization of this information later. But basically, this is one page out of 300 or 400. So this is a cover and a page of a very pretty one, actually, if you can call a court judgment pretty, but this happens to look nice. 1596, Cuenca, Spain. It's elaborate, is detailed. And the idea is that you're going to follow your lineage until you see one of these papers, okay? So you might be able to find some last wills and testaments, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. But basically, this document here from Cuenca would have another 200 pages behind it, and they were all exactly the same. It had the person's name and what they did, and then they did a full genealogy on about page 9. Who's the aunt and who's the uncle? They would go torture you, come back and give the genealogy again. They would say the crimes. It would say who turned you in, why they turned you in. I read these all the time, and I try to skip over the torture portion of the program, let's say, because you know I just don't need to see that. But it just goes all the way until the person was let's say let go or burned at the stake. So you know, this is not a pretty history, but it is our history nevertheless. And here's a rule of thumb that very few people will talk about, because I don't know how many people really get involved with this. Go west. When you start finding your sources with your family names, as you start finding them, and they are up all on Jewish Gen, and I'll talk about that in a minute, it means that the migrations mostly went from east to west. Here is a common migration: Spain to Portugal, to Belgium, to Holland, to the Netherlands Antilles, or other islands, and Mexico. Of course, there are people that went to Italy. Again, we are not talking about the Sephardim, you know, before somebody jumps up and reminds me of that. We are not talking about people that went to the Ottoman Empire. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the people that stayed, went jumping in this way. And if you, in the Jewish Gen collection, you can actually put in your name, like my family name, Medina. You can actually put in Medina, and then I have a whole list of people that are in there. I've digitized over, now it's over 60,000 entries that are in there that I personally digitized. And you will see, and it might start in Majorca, which is an island all the way to the right of Spain. It continues maybe into Toledo, continues into Portugal. My family, for example, many of them continued into Holland. Many left directly to the Caribbean from there. So go west. I think there was an old song, you know, go west, my friend. Just go west and you'll probably be in good hands. So other sources that exist around the world that you should take a really good look at are the taxes. On Jewish Gen, I have uploaded, digitized the taxes paid in many different towns in Spain. There's none for Portugal, but there are for Spain. So if you see how many taxes were paid by the Jews, first of all, you know there were Jews there, because you might look up a certain town, and if no taxes were paid, you would like, this may not be the right place I'm looking in. Because believe me, they were taxing the heads of each Jew. They were taxing you from the age, a male of 23, I believe it was. And then if you owned a goat, they taxed you more. If you owned a garden, they taxed you more. If you had more than 2 vegetables, they taxed you more. If you owned a vineyard, was like the huge tax. So important is to look at these taxes and these records all up on Jewish Gen. Museums all over the islands. I don't know about in other places, but this here is a museum in Curacao. And there's one just like this in Barbados, and they have them in St. Thomas. In Curacao, they happen to be all over the walls. The minute you walk into this tiny museum, the size of your computer, and you can barely move and look to the right and look to the left, the family trees are up on the walls. I mean, it's like incredible. If you happen to be from one of those families, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to live here. And so it's really important if you feel that your family is from Barbados, Curacao, Aruba, St. Eustatius, where the Jews first came in through St. Eustatius, Suriname. I mean, endless the population of Jews, because remember, they were plantation owners, many of them. And, you know, this was before, and the Spaniards were not really there. So they were kicked in and out, but they grew cocoa, they grew tobacco. They were very involved in coffee. They were very involved in sugar, you know, all of these kind of things. So they were kicked around, and their trees many times stayed behind. Family scribes. If you look at this document down here, this is the scribe from my family. So this is his signature. So the people could not really write on their own. So they had their own scribe. And the scribe would be with the family 30, 40 years, as long as a scribe could be. And sometimes when you hit a roadblock, you just start looking at the books, and you can handpick the drawing of your scribe. Every scribe had a specific little drawing. Mine, it looks like it was a sword. Other people, little triangles, little this, little that. But your family scribe was your family scribe. And they would do every single document. And why was this important? Because they would also forge your documents. And I found, when I first found my DNA exact match in Recife, Brazil, we compared trees. He had done up to the 22nd generation. At the time, I was on the 15th. And so we compared our trees, and they were totally different. I mean, like, they couldn't be more different. His was all from Portugal. Mine was all from Spain. I've since learned that before my 15th grandmother, 15 to 22, they were Portuguese, but I didn't know it at the time. But anyway, so we found one grandmother, the 14th, and the document had been forged. And it was this same scribe, he forged it. So when she lived in Portugal, her name was Guerrera, with a G. And her family in Portugal was caught by the Inquisition. She moved to this village on the other side of the river, and the scribe made the new name so they wouldn't be caught Herrera. So you can imagine that it was very difficult, but we both had done our genealogy. So we met up at the 14th generation. This cousin that I'm telling you about that has done the genealogy for centuries, we also have done our DNA on all of the different companies. It's also the 14th generation, funny enough. And if you look at the DNA results on any of the companies, it will tell you second, third cousin. So we are talking 14 generations. I have not found anyone closer than the 14th generation so far. And this is because it's so, the amount of endogamy you would think would make it look closer. But the only thing, the amount of endogamy, and by the way, in genealogy, that's called a collapsed pedigree. Normally people's trees go up, but our family tree collapses at every generation because of the first cousin marriages. So when you have this much endogamy, the relationships appear a lot closer than they are. So second or third comes up as the 14th. Additional records, census records, antique phone books, and the Museum of the Jewish People in Israel. Unfortunately, and I know they're working very, very hard on this at Bet HaTfutzot in Israel, they don't have much for us, let's say the crypto Jews. So normally you will go in there and you will see the village of your ancestors, perhaps like Fermoselle or Zamora, which is the nearest biggest town. But their history tends to stop when the Sephardim left. It didn't, for all practical purposes, there were no more Jews in Spain. Once they left, they were Catholic, and there, if you look at it like this, there weren't any Jews left. They didn't count that they were hiding. But the census records in the Iberian Peninsula are gold. So you may want to take a look at that. Other sources located overseas, books that are in libraries, and most importantly, are dissertations. So if you see these books here, The Jews of the Province of Zamora, and by the way, my town of Fermosella is in the province of Zamora. So it's like the county, let's say. So you see the second book, Jews and Conversos in the Reign of Castile. And this is where I got a lot of the information. But this is not available on the internet. So when you finally get yourselves to be able to go to Spain, then, or Portugal, then not only do you head for archives, you need a lot of time. And by the way, I have a whole other talk on how to research in Spain and Portugal. So actual research, and there is a handout that comes with this lecture, and Joy has put in the chat, you see the link. I've supplied a handout that will help you somewhat to understand how to do your research. But I would not have found these books if I had not been there present. The dissertations are amazing. A lot of these dissertations, if they're newer, can be found on the website academia.edu. And the good and bad thing about the dissertations is that if you hit bullseye, someone already studied your family. And that's kind of why they are not good, because maybe they studied mine, but maybe they didn't study yours. But normally when they do these dissertations, they have a lot of historical information, and they have the bibliographies, which will lead you to other sources. I find that I read a lot of these dissertations. I read them in English, I read them in Spanish, I'll read them in Portuguese, and I read them for the bibliographies to look for other things. So you have to get really creative here, okay? Remember, you're looking at the underbelly. Let's talk about heraldry first. So in Spain, everybody had like a coat of arms, let's say. So the coat of arms, obviously you can see this one has a Star of David. This is not a coincidence. And a lot of people, I've heard, well, the Star of David didn't come into use until, I don't know when it came into use. But all I know is that everybody that I know that has a heraldry, coat of arms, that has a Star of David, has a Jewish lineage. I have a very good friend in Miami who I went to Catholic school with, and I had coffee with him about 2 years ago, and we're sitting in the coffee shop, and I see this massive gold ring on him. And I said, let me see that. And I did not know he's a Catholic guy. I mean, really religious. So he gave me the ring and he said, that's our family crest. And I wish I had the picture here, but the family crest was like a lion surrounded with stars of David, leaning on like a genealogy tree. I'm like, what? So he said, yeah, they always told me my family was Jewish. I said, well, believe me, with this family crest, so it's important to look up the heraldry. Books and museums. So in the Canary Islands, for example, which had a massive inquisition, and they have not digitized all of their records, I found this book. I found two of these books. I think this is volume 1, Libro 1, they had 2. And it was just sitting there like on top of the desk, and it made me crazy that it wasn't digitized, because it was about 10 inches, and it had the names and genealogies of everyone that passed their inquisition. So it's a struggle, and a lot of the stuff isn't digitized. We'll talk about that at the end. Abbreviations and writings, it's in my handout. You have to have charts. Spanish and Portuguese, similar, but not the same. You have to see when you see and it says AG 10, let's say, that means August 10th. The symbol at means in the year of Christ. So you have to have this with you. What means city, what means credit, what means letter, CCA. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to decipher any of this. Jewish Gen, it was a big deal. And I can't express it. What a big deal it was to have crypto-Jewish genealogy make the big leagues. When I started in this 5 or 6 years ago, and I would go to the Jewish genealogy conferences, the IHAGS, I've been going for about 10 years, nobody paid attention to me. I mean, literally, they always let me speak. The auditoriums were packed with people, but the people at the top, nobody. I remember saying, I think this should be on Jewish Gen, and ignored to the now. If you look at the bottom here, there's a big deal that they've got crypto Jewish in here. And this collection comes from me digitizing personally from these dissertations, out of print books, things I found in libraries around the world, and things that I have photocopied, things that are not available. You know, people like think nowadays, especially, you know, if you're of a certain age group, oh my God, the internet, if it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist. What are you kidding me? Our stuff is not on the internet. I mean, it is to an extent, it's starting to go up there, but you better be looking outside of the internet if you want to find our lineages. Okay, this is some of the information available that I digitized. Very little here on this list, but there's a primer on crypto Jewish genealogy, abbreviations in the Portuguese archives, Inquisition transcripts or procesos. I've written everything in English and I've written everything in Spanish. So you can find everything in both languages. And believe me, go into the crypto Jewish collection in Jewish Gen and you will have a ball. Other important documents, and I'm trying to talk really quick. I don't want to run out of time, but it's a lot of information. In Spain and Portugal, the Catholic archives moved to the archdiocese after 100 years. So if you're looking for something from 1710, you're not going to find it at the local church. You have to go find where the archdiocese is, and then you head to their archives. Notary records are the most overlooked, but the best for genealogy, because that's where you find land sales, last wills and testaments, and things that are not church records. Powers of attorney, guardianships, it's like so rich. Synagogue Scribes is a website that has so many links to marriage records, mostly based out of London. But last wills and testaments of the Spanish Portuguese that went to London, I have found my own family in Synagogue Scribes. Ship manifests with all those leaving a country by ship. Always search in many ways and often. Data on the internet, it's uploaded all the time. Census records, blood cleansing records, and I told you before, the tax records. Blood cleansing, to get a job in the New World, you had to prove that you didn't have any Jewish in your blood. So who had to prove they didn't have any Jewish in their blood? The Jewish. So when you look at the blood cleansing records, even though they're telling you that they're proving that they didn't have anything, this is precisely why they were asking them to do it. So they are rich pieces for us. Sephardic Ancestry is my website where you will find every single archive in Spain, the phone number, the fax number, everything. There's just an amazing amount of information. And the Crypto Jewish Collection, like I said, at jewishgen.org, familysearch.com or org. I'm sorry, it may be .org, so forgive me for that. This is the Mormon website where they have uploaded all of the church records of Latin America. So you go in there, you go under special collections, you click on a map, Costa Rica or Peru or wherever it is, and you hope that someone has already uploaded the church records. I was able to do my paternal grandmother up to the 1600s in Costa Rica from familysearch.org. Okay, and this I wanted to show you because this is one of the most unusual things, and you'll never see this again unless I show it to you. All of this searching back, I mean, I found my Jewish lineage at the 15 grandmothers. That was really, I didn't have to do anything else, but I craved more than anything in the world to find the Jewish names of my family. I knew I was a Jew by 1545, and I knew I was a Jew when I found her back there. But this feeling that I wanted to know the Jewish names of my family. I mean, were they Levies? Were they this? Were they that? I went back 22 generations to 1405 and there was nothing. I couldn't find it. And I had started helping other people looking for their lineages. I don't do this for a living. I guide people. I tell them where to go. I advise where to go, but I don't do this for a living. So I kind of gave this up about 4 years ago of looking for the Jewish name, because if you already had converso names in 1405, then your family was converted in 1381 to 1391, which was the period in Jewish history of the most conversions. And people think, 1492, they dwell on it. But 2 weeks ago, my cousin Patrick in Belgium, he found this document. I want you to look at it very closely, because if you look at it very closely, it's in Hebrew. And inside the proceso, the judgment of my 19th grandfather, Diego de Leal, in Lisbon, usually it's all written. I showed you the proceso. They're written in Spanish, or they're written in Portuguese, or they were written in Spanish in Mexico. But stuck inside, there were 18 pages in Hebrew that you see here of this uncle. I mean, after all of these years that I've been in and out, never. So I started calling colleagues around the world. I mean, believe me, I must have knocked in the last week on 20 to 30 doors of famous historians, scholars, Inquisition scholars, from Mexico to Seattle to Argentina to Spain, everywhere. And everyone was like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And then we discovered that this is written phonetically in Hebrew, but it's really Spanish. So you have to look at the word from right to left, and it's not really Hebrew. So it's not going to be written in Hebrew. It's phonetically, they used Hebrew letters to put the Spanish. I have since found, and there's about 20 pages of this, I have since found it's meticulous work. It's transcribed in one book that I ordered on Amazon, and I'm like a puppy at the door waiting for it. And somebody had transcribed it, but I know already that the rabbis of the family were Rabbi Narboni, Rabbi Yantov, and Rabbi De Castro. And I'm beyond. So I wanted to show you that even no matter how long you do this, I've been doing this for so long, this document made me cry. So here is my family tree from 1600 up back, I mean. So meaning the last two up here is the 1400s. Everything that you see in olive green are family members directly on my maternal line. My maternal line is in purple, that were burned alive at the stake. And I think that their strength is my strength. To be able to help other people, to be able to just to get through this, and to be able to teach about it and help other people find their strength. Because I have to tell you that it's horrible, but it is what it is. And like I said, it is our history. I did record my own family history. I suggest all of you record it. My first book, My 15 Grandmothers, is my very first personal journey, where I talk about the struggles going from Catholic to Jewish and finding my way, and how I found my way. It's really, if you do get a chance to read it, they're all on Amazon. Some of them are on Kindle. They're in English and they're in Spanish. So there's 8 books. If you are able to read it, you will see that it reads like I talk, kind of breathless, kind of going on and on, but it really comes from my gut, because that was not an easy transition. The second one is how I found my 15 grandmothers, and that shows very detailedly what I've spoken about today, but in a lot more detail. Higher to Fire is a work of fiction, 85% true, where I speak about all of where my family went. I mean, I found them all. After I found the women, I found all the men, where they worked, where they lived, how they eluded the Inquisition, back and forth. And it's actually an incredible look through the keyhole at the crypto Jews. And finally, the recipes of my 15 grandmothers, that's my grandmother on the front, and on the bottom are her great-grandparents. So it's a family that kept recipes from the Inquisition. My mom had them. She never told me until I moved her out of the house. I found things that are recipes from before. The grandmothers just kept going forward and forward with them. And it's just something amazing that I was able to find the recipes of the 50 grandmothers. And all of that was actually recorded. The book was published in Israel 2 years ago. And that is it. So
Wow.
I need water.
I think so. It's funny, how at least you own the fact, that you talk and go on and on, but that's, it's a passion, it's a story. And I'm really interested to start off some of the questions. Joy and I have been, have some questions that we have. One of the things that I have, we get a lot of questions, especially at the library, about, since you have written, how did you sort of formulate what it was that you wanted to write, and where did you start, and some of the process of that, and then there's some other questions too.
So when I started writing my 15 grandmothers, it was a little bit cathartic to the difficulties I was having, changing from this, Cuban Catholic, let's say elite society, that my family was in, to, it took me many years to do it. I was feeling Jewish from a very young age, or feeling different. I won't say Jewish, but feeling different. And so it took me until after I was married and with 2 kids and 28 years old. And I started writing because I told my story in Argentina at a synagogue. And I already had found the 15 grandmothers. So, kind of the story in my head ended at 15 grandmothers. And the gentleman in Argentina said to me, "Have you written this down?" And I said, "No." Like, I was surprised. I said, "No." And he said, "You need to write this down." And I stayed in Argentina another couple of days. I didn't move from the hotel room. And I just started recounting how I had felt as my family rejected me, as I made this move, and I do talk about this lately, less and less. I'm sure you could find videos on YouTube about my own journey. It's extremely painful. I've turned it all, there's a saying, I think it's in Yiddish, "Ganze Latova," maybe it's in Hebrew, which means this is all for the good. It's all for the good. So at the end, I'm probably the proudest Jew, but it took a lot out of me. So that's how I did that book. How to do the 15 grandmothers. I wrote how to find them because so many people were asking me. We didn't have Zoom. I was detailing these long emails, and I just finally decided, you know what, let me put it in the book. Fire to Fire, I think, is the most important book I've written, because there was all of this, let's say, demographic information in the records. And I felt that it was very important to have the information written down of how did a crypto-Jewish family go from town to town. So I think it's just a matter, honestly, of sitting down and writing and making a list of the points you want to cover, and those points later become chapters.
Great. And then you gathered all the recipes. I mean, who knows what you find when you start, packing up everybody's stuff, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, so Joy, we got some questions. You want to read a couple?
Sure. Let's see. We've got any recommendation for records from Cuba around 1500s?
Yes. Cuba 1500 would be kind of a blend of Puerto Rico and Canary Islands. If you go into the Jewish Gen collection, you will find some records of Cuba. I do know of a very good genealogist in Cuba. And if you want to contact me later separately, Joy can let you know how to do that. I can give you her name. She took a couple of my branches back to the early 1600s. In 1500, there was an Inquisition in Cuba. So there's very little written on it. But if you write me separately, I will give you the name and contact details of a very good friend / colleague of mine in Miami, Cuban, who has dedicated the last 12 years of his life looking for the record. And also there is a Facebook group called Sociedad Luis Torres that it's all people from Cuba are on there. And if my people can't help you, and I think they can, but if they can't, then this group, Sociedad Luis Torres on Facebook, they have a lot of people there.
So is it okay that we put your email in the chat if Joy, is that how you want people?
They can contact me via my website, jeanniemilgrom.com.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So let's see, here's another one. Any specific tips for, and I'm gonna, of course, Joy, Menorcan, MENORCAN, Menorcan research.
From Menorca, yes, because the Menorca would be together with Majorca. And, you know, kind of, they're kind of lumped together. The Libro Verde de Aragon, if you have not seen it, is all digitized up on Jewish Gen. If you want to go further, I do have 2 genealogists from Majorca, Menorca, that work exclusively with crypto-Jewish lines. So if you want to contact me about those, I can recommend, and you know, they're being recommended. And I have another woman in Barcelona who does a lot of Menorca. So I can recommend probably 3 genealogists to you on that.
Great. Joy, what else you got on your list? Let's see.
If you can't read the language, what do you suggest for translations?
Well, it depends. If it's new language, and I mean 1800s forward, then Google Translate is the best. If it's old language, unfortunately, you're going to have to hire an expert because it's too different. It's too difficult, and it's very few people can really read 1500s kind of information. You will have to, you know, just like the ancestor used scribes, you're going to have to hire a scribe to be able to read it. It's really very different. The handout has some helpful aids, but again, if at the end of the helpful aids you can't make out the words, then that you may have to hire somebody.
Wasn't there a question, Joy, about the scribes? Yeah.
Yeah, Jeannie, when you mentioned family scribes, is that the same thing as notaries?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of notarial records.
Right, but back in the day, I mean, you know how to look up your own stuff, and you can fill out your own form at the driver's license office. But back in the day, they didn't really have to be able to write and to be able to read. So the scribe did it for them. So they were pretty, you know, useless until the scribe did it.
Okay. We had a question: is academia.edu, is that a subscription website?
You know, I don't know, because on Academia, I've never subscribed, and they just started sending emails, and I'm able to download stuff, and I'm never paid, and I don't know why, but but it's one of those things. So, you know, give it a shot. I don't know if I was lucky. I don't know if I did it before they charge. I don't know if they do charge, but I do get downloads from there. I got one 5 minutes before I came. So hope it's free.
Yeah, sounds like a great resource. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Jeannie, how can people find out about other talks that you're giving?
I put everything on Facebook. I have 2 Facebook groups. I have Jeannie Milgrom, and that is, and Jeannie Milgrom author. So Jeannie, if you want to see my grandkids and you know, and you want to see pictures and Shabbat Shalom and all this kind of like, you know, because I'm very like out there with people. I'm not like hiding behind all this stuff. So if you want to see when I'm talking along with my kids and grandkids and my mom, then go to Jeannie Milgrom. If you just want to see my talks, then go to Jeannie Milgrom author. And you don't have to put up with, you know, me giving my mom, who's 93, a kiss for the first time after the pandemic.
Aww.
So, you know, but I do want to say where we're going with all this information nowadays. Since 2015, I have spearheaded a project that to digitize all of these Inquisition documents, because at the end of the day, if the rabbis in Israel and around the world, all they want you to prove is an Inquisition documents, then by golly, they have to be digitized because hello. And so I had, for 5 years, I have been traveling in and out of Lima, in and out of Peru, in and out of Mexico, not Mexico, because Mexico, I've been able to do it without flying in and out, but in and out of the Spanish archives, Ground Zero at Portugal. And it's been very difficult. I have been fully funded by, it's been fully funded by MyHeritage in Israel. And we finally, during the pandemic in August of last year, got the contract from the Portuguese Inquisition Archive, which was amazing. And it's my understanding, and the scanners were in their lobby this April, the minute that they reopened the scanners in there. It's my understanding that they're going to be up online at the end of the fourth quarter. And I'm still struggling with Spain. Look, nobody wants this history out there. It's ugly. It's black. We talked about it. You know, it's a dark, dark moment in these, countries. And just like the Holocaust history, it's not so simple. And, I'm dredging it up. But believe me, I'm relentless. And these people have me on their email every couple of days, like, hello, what's the status? So I was successful so far. And very soon we'll be able to see this up and digitized. It will be an incredible gift to people studying the diaspora, people studying their own histories. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this with the world.
So at MyHeritage, Jeannie, is that where they're going to be, on MyHeritage?
Absolutely, because he's paying for them. I'm sure you'll see this in the news because he doesn't want to come out publicly. He allows me to, the owner allows me to speak about this, but he doesn't want to until they're on his website. So they told me end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and that is a database that we have at the library. So we do have that. So we'll be watching for that.
Absolutely, I'll let you all know.
Yeah, that's great. So let's see. One of the questions is, if you are raised Christian, how do you get familiar with Jewish customs and terminology? Any books for us beginning the journey of research?
I assume the person that wrote this was raised Christian and is wanting to return to the Jewish people. Is that what I'm hearing? If that person could elaborate.
Mary, are you still online? I mean, if you are, you can unmute and maybe. Mary Hoyer was the person that asked.
Okay, so if you're wanting to know about the Jewish people more, I think that there's two things that you should be looking at. There's one called I Am a Jew, and there's another one that talks about our festivals and our customs and talking about our history. In other words, I think those three things will be able to elevate you with a level of knowledge. I think understanding our history, how we started as a people, and I'm not talking biblically, I'm talking physically. I'm not talking, like reading the Haggadah or, the return on Passover. I'm talking about historically, where did the Jewish people start? And I think that understanding our history is really excellent because it'll give you a further understanding about the conflicts that you see in the news these days. And how to be a Jew, or I think that's what it's called, or I Am a Jew. This will also talk to you about the spiritual aspects, because it's not just, let's say, a title. I think that being Jewish is also how you react, how charitable. People talk about how charitable the Jews are. Well, it's actually an aspect of who we are. And then finally, a book on all the festivals, and for you to understand what happens around the festivals. And once you read those three things, information on those three things, then I think it's time for you to decide at what level of Judaism you're comfortable and go visit your closest, friendliest rabbi. And that's the good way to start. But I wouldn't go and make that visit or knock on that door until you arm yourself a little bit with our essence of who we are and our history and what we celebrate. I think that's probably the best. Would you agree, Sue?
I think so. I think so. I mean, yes, I do think so. So it is, and I think as everyone, I mean, this is a very rich history and it is a very feeling history. I mean, we all have everyone has their own thing, but it has been, even though I don't go to synagogue, maybe it still is a big part of my life. And I feel, I mean, you celebrate, what the holidays are and what the festivals are. So,
and I will say, I chose to be Orthodox. I converted 33 years ago. And for me personally, it was the only way to go. I tried out all of the other levels of Judaism. It wasn't enough because I caused such a ruckus in my family and it was so difficult. I said, no. You know what? If I'm going to do this, it's got to be like all the way, and I'm going to do it. And I've been a very happy Orthodox Jew for 33 years. I was kind of worried about the time because I do observe Shabbat. But that was me. That's not everybody's path. And I respect and understand everybody's path, but that was me. I'm an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah. Joy, anything else in the chats?
Lots of compliments, Jeannie. Thanking you and excellent job. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Really appreciate it. Yes.
Somebody put in the chat, and Mary, that was the book I was thinking of. It's called The Jewish Book of Why.
Okay.
Okay, that's the second one. So listen, contact me anytime. I will answer each and every email. Contact me via my website, jeanniemilgram.com, at whatever you want, whatever you need, whatever. Right now, our holidays are coming next week. Shabbat is now. I probably won't be able to answer until the end of next week because we're celebrating the holiday of Shavuot on Monday and Tuesday. So, but just reach out, and I am just an email away or my Facebook.
Well, thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Justin and Joy, Jeannie, thank you all for being here. Justin and Joy, thank you always. All right. We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Thank you.